cheerleaders of death! Witness the cheerleaders of death and destruction! Death and destruction! They kill innocent babies to make their living.
We look at one of the most divisive issues in America, abortion. New laws limiting abortion have been enacted in North Carolina, Missouri, and of course Texas. But sometimes as minds close and lines harden, we lose sight of the people on each side of the divide.
Abortion, an issue that has been controversial since its genesis. Roe v. Wade made abortion legal in 1973, but that was nowhere near the end of the debate. Since then, the pro-life movement has been actively working at reversing the ruling, one that gave women the right to safe, legal abortion.
In 1973, when I was in 7th grade, that's when abortion became legal. And I can still remember sitting in biology class talking about parasites and hosts and thinking, well, clearly a baby is alive and you have to do something to stop it from living, and that's clearly wrong to me.
We are looking at the possibility of overturning Roe v. Wade. There's theoretically enough votes on the Supreme Court to overturn this decision.
Since Roe passed and became the law of the land, the anti-choice movement has been organized and mobilized, strategically working to undermine it at every turn, and eventually get to the point where they have enough conservative justices on the Supreme Court to overturn it.
Throughout the pro-life movement's mission of ending Roe v. Wade, they opened crisis pregnancy centers. Today, there are roughly 2,700 crisis pregnancy centers in the United States, vastly outnumbering abortion clinics. While they offer a variety of pregnancy-related services and resources, abortion is not one of them.
In the pro-life movement, we tend to call them pregnancy help centers. Help centers are there to help vulnerable women facing an unplanned pregnancy with resources, education, and everything they need to go through this sometimes scary part of life.
Crisis pregnancy centers, that we refer to more often as fake women's health centers, are really very manipulative.
This is the FACT Act. Passed in 2015, it was created by a pro-choice group known as NARAL. This act required all clinics in California, including anti-abortion crisis pregnancy centers, to tell their patients that abortion is a state-sanctioned option. Crisis pregnancy centers challenged this law, believing that it went against their First Amendment right to free speech. This case, known as NIFLA v. Becerra, moved to the Supreme Court this June. In a 5-4 ruling, the FACT Act was overturned.
We were devastated and also appalled by the ruling because it essentially says to women, you do not deserve comprehensive, unbiased, medically and factually accurate information. It is fine for these crisis pregnancy centers, for these fake women's health centers, to mislead you and to provide you with false information.
Suddenly, crisis pregnancy centers are not required to talk to you about abortion. Abortion's not a social issue, it's a medical issue. It's between me and my provider, and suddenly we're now in a legal landscape where apparently this particular medical provider doesn't have to tell me anything about abortion. Query whether that's the kind of medical advice you want.
I think honestly, in this day and age, anybody who really wants to get an abortion can find their way to it.
Most people know today that that is an option, so you don't need to tell them. They know.
We as a society are tuned to thinking that what the majority knows is what everybody knows.
I don't think all women know their rights. I think if you're around a wealthy area like the Bay Area, and we're very lucky because we do have a lot of options here, but for most women, I don't think they have that kind of information readily available, and I don't think they have the right information.
Pregnancy centers have historically been able to manipulate sort of search engine algorithms so that they end up being the first to show up. They're placing themselves next to real clinics to confuse women. They're giving themselves these names that are similar to real clinics to confuse women.
We spoke with a young woman who chose to remain anonymous for privacy reasons, who was directly affected by what the ruling allows.
I was really scared to tell my friends and to tell my family, and I needed to find support elsewhere. So I Googled abortion providers, and I found a clinic in San Francisco. I thought that they were doctors. They were, wearing white coats and a name tag, and they looked official. They talked down to me about the risk of drug abuse and infertility that was linked to abortion. And when I left the office, I was unbelievably confused. And so after I went home and looked more into the facility, I actually found out that they were an unlicensed center and had one motive, and that was to stop me from aborting the pregnancy.
The law that was passed in California, which is the law that was struck down by the Supreme Court, was quintessentially related to the ability of an individual.
The people that are making those decisions, most of them are men, and these people, they don't really know what it is about. They don't have the experience of being pregnant. They don't know what it is when you get pregnant, when you don't want a pregnancy. They're not in your shoes.
Women's reproductive rights are absolutely fundamental to women being equal members of society.
These rights may be fundamental, but, as we see in the case of Nifla B. Becerra, aren't unlimited. When abortion politics begin to manifest themselves through the pushing of agendas and deception, like we see in the case of modern-day crisis pregnancy centers, we, as a society, are in trouble.
Your right ends where my nose begins. I have my own rights around me. I get to decide.
Our generation, my generation, yours, is now facing this really existential threat against our own autonomy.